So now that we have our static file set up as well as our new product admin or product image model, we are finally able to run through making some actual products and showing these products on our homepage. So let's actually try that out now. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our views where home exists, and we're going to put some of our products here. But in this case, we're going to put only featured products. So I'm actually going to grab this products right here, and I'm going to take off these context stuff, the request user and all that, place in products, set up context to being products. All right, so now if we look at home, we still see it's going to be the same thing, but let's actually look at home.html. So in products, home. So now we'll just say, we'll leave the Jumbotron for what it is now. And then below the Jumbotron, we're going to add in some content here. So I'll do div class equals to row. And in the div. And then I'll do for product in products. So we're going to list out the first product with the for loop. And product.title. Okay, so if I refresh, I see that there's product 1 here. I do notice that, well, I don't actually want it way over here. It's not lined up very well. So I want to actually do some changes. I'm going to cut out this Jumbotron, and I'm going to create a new block. I'm going to cut out the note for it too. And then create a new block Jumbotron. In block, paste it in there, and then in our base file I'll add the block Jumbotron above the container, so block Jumbotron in block. So now if we look at it, it goes full length. So if we add another container for it, we'll do div class equals to container. There we go. So now it has its own container, and whenever we want to actually put in the Jumbotron, that's how we'll do it. But in fact, I would make it a little bit better and use the Jumbotron to be in the container when we actually use the Jumbotron, because we don't need that container code there if the Jumbotron is not being used. Right, so if this Jumbotron, if we don't want anything in it, we don't want to actually have it show up. So now if we look at products like what we had before, or all, or sorry, products, we go to products, we see that it's actually pulling it in, where now we go back to our home page, still pulling off on the side a little bit. So back in here, we see that we have our div class of row, and then if I do div class equals to column small 12, it will bring everything in. So I save it, and it brings it in a little bit, and it's actually lined up with the top of it right there. So it's actually lined in line with the logo. So we can change the Jumbotron later to actually fix that. So for now, I'll keep Jumbotron out and do Jumbotron 2, just so we can see the product is now lined up with that. And that's what we want. So this is a good time to actually talk about Bootstrap a little bit. We are going to jump into Bootstrap, so getbootstrap.com, and if we look into getting started, what we want to look at, go into CSS. We want to look at how the grid system works. So go ahead and go to getbootstrap.com/CSS, and you want to look at this grid system. But I'm going to try my best to explain it in a way that you'll actually understand it, and it's by looking at the grid system as columns. Okay, so each row, so if you have a div of row, so this right here, within that row it has 12 columns. It's built to have 12. And that's because we can change the amount of columns that it will span. So like this column, this one right here, this div only spans 1 column. This only spans 1 column, whereas this one spans 8 columns. Right, so it's indicated by that last number as far as how far it will span. Right, so if this one says 6 at the end of it, that means it's going to be half of the row And then same with this one, it says 6 is going to be half, where 4 will be a third of it, as we see by these 3 columns here. Right, so and then the middle number, or the MD, is going to be based off of the size that it's going to be working in. Right, so if the browser is large or it's big, then it's definitely going to look like this. But if the browser is really small, like if I keep changing the size of the browser, then it actually changes, right? So this is a medium, or this is a small size browser now. So like it's around the size of a tablet. So it actually changes the column to be full, right? So if I keep going even smaller, it's going to stay, and this is what's called responsive. It's actually changing in size to the size of the browser. It's kind of hard to see with how those columns are set up right now, but it's very nice because then we can work with it on different sizes too. So if we want it to be small and change, then it will change. Now that's really basic stuff. It's kind of confusing at first, so it gets a little bit easier as you start to work with it. So what I did was I did column small 12. So this entire row here is 12 long, or it's 12. It spans 12 wide, so it's 12 columns wide. So if I did it as 1, it's 1, and it's hard to see with just products, so we actually will need to add some stuff in there. So let's actually make it into being, I'm going to do it 4, and I'm going to put it inside of the for loop. Okay, so now I'm putting it inside of the for loop, and the same result still happens. So what I have to do is actually add some more products. So I'm going to go into the terminal. I'm going to cancel out the server and do python manage.py shell. And I'm going to import the product model and just make some new ones so we can just have quite a few actually loaded in here so we can actually see kind of how this breaks down. So from products.models, import product, and then I'll do product.objects.create title equals to product, slug equals to slug, and price equals to $19.99. Alright, so it created it, and I'm going to create a few more just by pressing up and enter. We've already done this before, but it's nice to see it in action again, just so we can put in some test data. And now I'm going to exit out of here and run the server again. Alright, so if I refresh in here, now we start to see the products and how it's actually coming together as far as how we have the column set up. Right, so now since it's in this for loop, it's creating a new div class every single time. So if I took it out of the for loop like this, then they're going to be all right next to each other, right? And that makes sense. And notice it's only 4 wide, right? So it's only 4 columns wide, where if I made it 12, it's just going to be a nice long list of the product titles, like that, right? And that hopefully that makes sense. That's kind of how the for loop's going to work. If not, just play around with it and just try it out on your own. I'm going to move it back in here, and I'm going to keep the column as 12 and do a refresh. And notice it's now all basically a fresh new row each time. But it's not actually a row. It's still all contained in the element of row, right? So that row container right there, if I close that down, it actually closes all of them. Where 12, it's taking up that entire span. So what it does is it pushes the next span down a row. And then that one takes over 12, so it pushes the next one down a row. All right, so why don't we kind of play around with this a little bit, and instead of having column small 12 each time, let's actually change it to where it cycles through a couple. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding what's called a cycle, and cycle allows it to change based on the iteration. So we'll see this in just a second. I'll explain it more. So small 4, and then column small 8, and then in the cycle. And then if we do a refresh in here, we see that 1 takes up 12, and then the next 2, 1 takes up 4, and then this takes up 8. All right, so what's happening with cycle? So when you go through a for loop, if you run something called cycle, it's going to use what's ever in that cycle. Right, so if I use this cycle again, and I'll say like first of loop ing cycle, and then I copy that and say second of looping cycle, second of, and then I go into this last one and say third, and I go back into Chrome and refresh. I see that it says first of looping cycle product 1, second of looping cycle product, third of looping cycle product. So let's actually do product ID instead of the actual product title so we can see it a little bit better. Do a refresh, and it says the first of loop, and it's going through. So each time it hits 3 loops, or on the third iteration it stops, right? So the first one goes through, it's going to be column small 12, and it'll say first cycle. The second one that goes through, it goes to second looping cycle. The third one that goes through, it goes to third looping cycle, and then it starts all over again if there's another item. So then it goes and does the first looping cycle again, second looping cycle again, third looping cycle again. So this can make it a little bit smart for us. But for now, I'm going to get rid of this cycle stuff, and I'm just going to go with column small 4. So then if I go into here, it's now separated into 4 columns. And we have 17 items inside of products. So I have 17 products right now, and you can see that as denoted by each one. So each loop goes through and it's showing that particular item. All right, so now we can start really working with some of the stuff. So if we do product.title and then product.price, we could add description, but most of them don't actually have a description, so I'll leave it out for now. So it's going to be product, title, price, right? So we have product ID, product title, and then the price. And then all the other ones are basically the same because we created them as the same. Now the next thing that we'd want to do is we want to actually loop in our image for the product. And this is something that's really cool about foreign keys. So if we look at our in our models, we see that it's related by this foreign key. So that means that we can actually call product image very similar to how we call product.title. So if we look back into home, see how we have product.title, I can also call product image. It's just a little bit different. So product.image set.all. I'll explain that in just a second. So we save that and we refresh, and it looks as if our first product is the only one that has 3 images, and that makes sense because it's the only one that we actually uploaded 3 images to, and the other ones have all these empty lists, as should be expected because they don't actually have any images themselves. So let's think about this for a second. Product image is the same thing as our model name right here. So product is we're grabbing the product, and then we're grabbing the model name that's associated to it because of the foreign key, and then we're grabbing the set, right? So it's basically, here's another way to say it, is it's the model, and then model name with foreign key, and the set of it, and then all of those objects. Okay, so product is the original model that is connected to the product image model, and then we're going to get the entire set that is connected to that product model, and then we're going to get everything, right? And if you notice, we did not put product image inside of our view, right? It's not the context in our view, and this is what's nice about foreign keys. It has that relationship, so we can actually connect them together. All right, so let's actually play around with this a little bit, and I'm going to go through the loop of these. So for image in product.image.set.all, in for, I'll just say image, and we'll see what that is. If I refresh, it says product 1111, and that's the Unicode, if you remember. So if we go into our models, we see Unicode is going to get the product title. So this is grabbing the foreign keys title. So all we're doing is the reverse of that in our home.html. This is the reverse of what the Unicode's doing in a sense. But with .all, it's grabbing everything that's associated. So since it's a foreign key, it can have a lot of things associated to this. It can have an unlimited amount of images associated to this product, right? It's not a one-to-one field. So if we did one-to-one field, that means exactly what it sounds like, and that's one product image per one product. And that's not what we want. We want to use foreign key so we can have a bunch of fields to that one product. All right, so now that we have this, we can grab the image and we can grab whether or not it's featured. So let's try that out. So image.image, or let's instead change this to item so we don't get confused. It's the item in the for loop, so item.image. So this should give us a list or a link of where that image is located. So it does. It gives us where it's actually been uploaded to, but it doesn't give us the full link, right? So if we try to link this in as an image, so image source equals to image.image, we're going to run into an error. So if I do that, we see 3 broken images. That's not right, right? So what we have to use is media root, just like that, refresh. But it's actually not loading it in. So that is because if we look into our media, go in here and grab it, we still see that media root is not actually showing up. So let's try media URL and refresh. Now it's actually coming through. And it's showing the image. Unfortunately, this image is text, but it's actually coming through. So media root doesn't work, but media URL will actually grab the media URL, which is in our settings that we set up. It's grabbing this right here. So it's pulling in that media, and we're now able to see those pictures actually coming through. And then we can also see if the item itself is featured. So item.featured, and it's going to say false, false, and false. So all around, false all around. Okay, so let's actually change one to being featured, and we'll say if item.featured, and if. Okay, I'm actually going to grab a better image. I'm going to search for a beach, and I'm going to just drag this beach onto my desktop. It's probably going to be kind of small, but that's okay. Go to admin, log in to our admin, product images. We're going to add a new image. I'm going to add it to this is a product image and search. Save it. All right, so we just added a new image, and I want to do featured. Save it, and then we can come in here and look, and now it shows just the featured image, right? So if item's the featured, then it's just showing the featured image, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So if I put it above everything, it's now above that, and we can start playing around with it where these images would be on all of our products, and so we can see a bunch of different products and see how those images are actually going to come through. But before we finish this video, I'm actually going to delete a bunch of the products because we don't need that many, and we also are going to have to work with quite a few, or just a few, so we can get the idea. All right, so I will delete all of these products, and there we go. Deleted. So now it's a little bit more manageable of how to work with it. Something you should note right away is, hey, how come this is coming up, right? It should be below it, right? So if we look inside of our inspect element, we see that we have this row. We have a column 4 here, but it's kind of big in comparison to the other ones because of that image, right? It's a little bit taller. So how do we bring this image actually down? And that has to do with cycle. So just like what we saw before, this time I'm going to do cycle, and I'm going to add 3 of them. And the reason it's 3 is because we're using 4 here, and remember it takes up 12 columns, so there's going to be 3 of them, 3 iterations of them. So at the end of the third one, that's why this cycle's way down here, I want to close off this and close off the row and create a new row and a new one of these. So we'll see what that does in just a second. So I'm going to close off the div, close off the row, so that closes off this one, this closes off that one, and we're going to create a new row, class, or div class equals to single quote row in single quote, and then div class equals to column small 4. All right. So all this is doing is on the very third like iteration, so the very third time in the loop, at the very end of it, It's going to close off that row, and it's going to close off that div, and it's going to create a brand new row and a brand new div because we need to separate the rows out. So I save it, go in here and refresh, and now it actually jumps down to the bottom. It's still not perfect, right? So if we scroll down a little bit, we will see that, hey, it's down here, but it's way off to the side. It's not actually in where we need it to be, and that's because of this. I actually made a mistake, and I should not have that column right there because we have that div right here. So I'm actually going to cut that, paste that up one, and so now it's definitely at the end of that for loop. And what this means is I can actually remove that div and do a refresh, and there we go. And it looks like we actually don't need that either. All we needed to do was get rid of that row, and there we go. And the reason we didn't need this stuff, so let's think through it again, is once it ends the loop, it's going to go back to the top of the loop. It's not going to go to the row. So what I did was just at the end of this div class, I finished off the div row, and then I created a new div row, and then it already made a new column small for us. So there's that. That's kind of how that's going to work. And if we wanted to separate it a little bit, we could do break, and then also HR, so line, and then there we go. So now it's actually separating out to each row. And if we had all 17 or whatever like we did before, it would show all of those. Now if we wanted to change this to being 4 across, we would change this to 3, and then we'd have to add a new cycle in. So just an empty string of cycle, and then refresh, and now it's coming in here, and we notice that line is down there at the bottom. If I didn't have that, it would still be at the bottom because of us closing it off right there. So that's that. All right, well, we're going to be doing more with this stuff, so just keep that in mind. If it's a little confusing now, that's okay. Just try and practice it, check the reference code, do all those things. Otherwise, we will see you in the next one.